The Volanthi Dominion had ruled the stars for 12,000 years, and in all that time, they had never once feared another species. High Sovereign Maldois sat upon his throne in the crystal spire of Velen Prime, surrounded by his most trusted advisors and generals. The throne room stretched for hundreds of meters in every direction, its walls made of living crystal that glowed with soft purple light. Holographic displays floated in the air, showing the vast territory of the Dominion, 800 star systems filled with wealth and power beyond measure. The Volanthi were magnificent creatures, standing 3 meters tall with armored scales covering their bodies. Their claws could tear through metal, and their minds could touch the thoughts of lesser beings. They had conquered dozens of species throughout their long history, bending the weak to serve the strong. This was the natural order of things, or so they believed. On this day, a new species had come to beg for their favor. Ambassador Sarah Cathrall of the United Earth Coalition stood in the center of the throne room, looking very small and very alone. She was a human woman of middle age, with brown skin and gray streaks in her black hair. She wore a simple blue uniform with no armor and carried no weapons. To the Volanthi nobles gathered around her, she looked like a child playing at diplomacy. The humans had discovered faster than light travel only 60 years ago. In cosmic terms, they were practically newborns stumbling into a galaxy full of ancient predators. Their territory consisted of just 14 colony worlds, a tiny speck compared to the Dominion's endless expanse. Their ships were small and slow, built from common metals and powered by primitive fusion reactors. Their soldiers carried simple chemical weapons and wore soft cloth uniforms. They were, in every measurable way, insignificant. High Sovereign Maldois gestured for the human to speak, his golden eyes gleaming with amusement. He had agreed to this meeting only because he found the idea entertaining. A species barely out of its cradle, coming to negotiate with the masters of the Orion Spur. What could they possibly offer that would interest him? Ambassador Cathrall bowed respectfully before beginning her proposal. High Sovereign, I come on behalf of all humanity to propose a partnership between our peoples, she said in a calm and steady voice. We offer fair trade agreements that would benefit both our economies. We propose mutual defense pacts to protect against common threats. We seek only friendship and cooperation between our species. She went on to describe what humanity could offer, their creativity and their industrial capacity, and their willingness to work hard. She spoke of cultural exchange and scientific cooperation. She painted a picture of two civilizations growing stronger together. When she finished, silence filled the throne room for exactly 3 seconds. Then the laughter began. It started with the young nobles near the back, their chittering amusement spreading through the crowd like a wave. Soon the generals were laughing, and the advisors were laughing, and even the servants were struggling to contain their mirth. The sound echoed off the crystal walls, surrounding the human ambassador from every direction. Ambassador Cathrall did not react. She simply stood there with her hands folded, waiting for the noise to die down. High Sovereign Maldois raised one clawed hand and the laughter stopped immediately. He leaned forward on his throne, studying the small creature before him with something that might have been pity. Little mammal, he said, his deep voice rumbling through the chamber. Do you understand what you are asking? You come to the Volanthi Dominion, rulers of 800 worlds, conquerors of 17 species, masters of technologies your kind cannot even comprehend. And you ask us to be your friends. He stood from his throne and walked down the steps toward her, his massive form towering over her fragile body. The Volanthi do not ally with prey species, he continued. We do not make friends with creatures who would die from a single swipe of our claws. Your kind builds ships from scrap metal and calls them a fleet. Your soldiers wear cloth and carry weapons that our hatchlings would find amusing. You have no psionic abilities, no natural armor, no venom, no claws. He stopped just a few feet away from her, close enough that she had to crane her neck to look at his face. "You are weak," he declared. "You are small. You are nothing." The court murmured in agreement. "Return to your mud world, Ambassador," Malloy said, turning his back on her and walking toward his throne. "Be grateful that we find your species too insignificant to bother conquering. Perhaps in another 1,000 years, when you have evolved into something worth noticing, we might consider your request. Until then, do not waste our time again." He settled back onto his throne and waved dismissively. This audience is concluded. Ambassador Kethril remained still for a long moment, her dark eyes moving slowly across the faces of the assembled Volanti. She looked at the laughing nobles and the sneering generals and the amused servants. She looked at the High Sovereign sitting smugly on his throne. Then she did something that confused everyone in the room. She smiled. It was not the desperate smile of the defeated negotiator. It was not the nervous smile of someone trying to hide their fear. It was a small and quiet smile, the kind that held secrets. She gathered her documents and placed them neatly in her case. She straightened her uniform and lifted her chin. "I understand completely, High Sovereign," she said in that same calm voice. "I will report your response to my government." She turned to leave, then paused at the doorway and looked back over her shoulder. "One more thing," she said. "You will regret this." The court erupted in fresh laughter. What a ridiculous thing to say. What could humans possibly do to make the mighty Volanti regret anything? Ambassador Kethril walked out of the throne room without another word, her footsteps echoing in the vast chamber until she disappeared from sight. High Sovereign Maldois shook his head and turned to his advisors. "Humans," he said with a chuckle. "Such strange little creatures. So much confidence in a species with so little power. Make a note in the records that they came here today. Perhaps future generations will find it amusing." His advisors laughed and agreed. None of them noticed that the human ambassador had never once looked afraid. None of them wondered why she had smiled at the end. None of them thought to question why a species as weak as humanity would send an ambassador to deliver such a bold warning. These questions would haunt them soon enough. But for now, the Volanti Dominion returned to its business, confident in its power and certain of its supremacy. They had ruled for 12,000 years, and they would rule for 12,000 more. The humans were nothing. They were sure of it. 6 months passed after the meeting at Velum Prime, and the Volanti Dominion had already forgotten about the human ambassador and her foolish warning. Fleet Commander Rethax stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, watching the stars streak past as his fleet traveled through hyperspace. He was a veteran of 30 campaigns, a warrior who had helped crush 3 rebellions and conquered 2 species. His scales bore the golden markings of high military rank, and his eyes held the cold confidence of someone who had never known defeat. 40 warships followed behind him, each one a masterpiece of Volanti engineering. They bristled with plasma cannons and missile batteries and energy shields that could withstand almost any attack. The Third Fleet was not the largest in the Dominion, but it was more than enough for this mission. Their destination was the Kepler 442 system, a star with several planets rich in rare minerals. The Dominion needed those minerals for its war machines and its factories. The fact that the system was technically claimed by humans meant nothing to Rethax. Lesser species did not get to own valuable resources. That was simply not how the galaxy worked. "Commander," his sensor officer called out, "we will exit hyperspace in 10 minutes. Rethax nodded and settled into his command chair. He had reviewed the intelligence reports on this system many times. The humans had established a colony on the 4th planet, a world they called New Providence. The population was around 340,000, mostly farmers and miners and factory workers. Their defense force consisted of 6 small frigates and a handful of orbital platforms. It would not even be a battle. It would be a gentle reminder of who truly ruled this part of the galaxy. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system and began moving toward the 4th planet. Rethax ordered his communications officer to monitor human transmissions, expecting to hear panic and confusion. Instead, he heard something that surprised him. "Volanthi Fleet, this is Governor Sarah Chun of New Providence," a female voice announced over all channels. "You have entered sovereign human territory without permission. You are ordered to withdraw immediately. This is not a request." Rethax looked at his officers, and they all shared a moment of disbelief. Were the humans actually trying to give them orders? This was either the bravest or the most foolish thing he had ever witnessed. "Put her on screen," he commanded. The main display flickered and showed a human woman sitting behind a desk. She appeared to be in some kind of government building, surrounded by aides and military officers. Her face was calm and her voice was steady, showing no sign of fear despite the massive fleet approaching her world. "Governor Chun," Rethax said with amusement in his voice, "I am Fleet Commander Rethax of the Volanthi 3rd Fleet. Your species was warned 6 months ago not to waste our time. Now you waste it again by pretending you have any authority here." "This is human space," the governor replied. "We have treaties and laws that establish our borders. Your presence here is an act of aggression." "Treaties," Rethax laughed. "Laws. These things apply to civilizations, little mammal. Your kind barely qualifies. Now stand aside and let us conduct our business, or face the consequences." Governor Chun leaned forward, her eyes hard as stone. "Fleet Commander, I am giving you one chance to turn your ships around. You have 20 standard hours to withdraw from this system. This is your only warning." The bridge crew burst into laughter. Even Rethax could not contain his amusement. This tiny creature, this soft and fragile human, was threatening a Volanthi war fleet. "Or what?" Rethax asked between chuckles. "Will you throw rocks at us? Will your pathetic frigates scratch the paint on our hulls?" Governor Chun did not smile. She did not blink. She simply stared at him with those strange human eyes. "No, Commander," she said quietly. "We will call home." Rethax dismissed her words with a wave of his claw. 20 hours, he announced mockingly. "I give you 2 hours to surrender your colony and all its resources. After that, we will take what we want regardless." He cut the transmission and ordered his fleet to advance. Over the next hour, the human frigates moved to intercept them. Rethax almost felt sorry for the brave little ships as they positioned themselves between his fleet and their homeworld. They were so small compared to his warships, like insects challenging a storm. He ordered his weapons officer to destroy the orbital defense platforms first. Plasma lances reached out across the void, and the platforms exploded in brilliant flashes of light. 1,200 humans died in those first few seconds. Soldiers and technicians who had no chance against such overwhelming firepower. The human frigates returned fire, but their weapons barely scratched Volanthi shields. One by one, they were disabled or destroyed, their crews killed or left drifting helplessly in space. Within 2 hours, New Providence was defenseless. Rethax sent landing parties to the surface to begin securing the mining sites. He transmitted a message to Governor Chun, demanding her immediate surrender. He expected tears and begging and desperate pleas for mercy. Instead, he received silence. Deep beneath the surface of New Providence, in a bunker designed to survive orbital bombardment, Governor Chun sat alone in front of a special communications device. It looked nothing like standard human technology because it was not standard. It was a quantum entangled transmitter, capable of sending messages instantly across any distance. Only a handful of people in the entire human government knew these devices existed. Only a handful knew about the program they connected to. Only a handful knew the truth about humanity's real capabilities. Governor Chun typed in her authorization code and activated the transmitter. A calm female voice responded immediately. "Authentication confirmed, Governor Chun. What is your message?" Chun took a deep breath and spoke 2 words that would change the course of galactic history. Prometheus Protocol. There was a pause on the other end. "Understood, Governor. Help is on the way. Estimated arrival time is 18 hours. Hold on." The transmission ended. Chun leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. 1,200 of her people were already dead. More would likely die before this was over. But the Volanthi had made a terrible mistake today. They had assumed that humanity was weak because humanity had allowed them to believe that. They had no idea what was coming. On the surface above, Volanthi soldiers were rounding up human civilians and claiming resources for the Dominion. They laughed and joked about the easy conquest. They sent messages home to their families about the foolish humans who had tried to resist. None of them noticed the subtle change in the human prisoners. None of them saw the hidden smiles and the knowing glances. None of them understood why some of the humans seemed almost excited despite their situation. The countdown had begun. In 18 hours, the Volanthi Third Fleet would learn the truth. And they would learn it the hard way. 18 hours had passed since the fall of New Providence, and Fleet Commander Rethax was feeling very pleased with himself. The conquest had been even easier than expected. Human civilians were now working under Volanthi supervision, mining the precious minerals that the Dominion needed. The planetary government had been captured, and the resistance had been minimal. Rethax had already sent a report to High Command, expecting praise and perhaps even a promotion for this successful operation. He sat in his quarters reviewing the inventory of seized resources when his communications officer interrupted him with an urgent message. "Commander, you need to come to the bridge immediately." Rethax growled in annoyance, but made his way to the command center. When he arrived, he found his entire bridge crew staring at their sensor displays with expressions he had never seen before. "Fear. What is happening?" he demanded. His sensor officer turned to face him, her scales pale with shock. "Sir, we are detecting massive energy signatures at the edge of the system. Ships are arriving through some kind of portal technology we have never seen before." Rethax pushed past her to look at the displays himself. What he saw made his blood run cold. Space itself seemed to be tearing open, great wounds of light appearing against the darkness. Through these wounds came ships, but not like any ships Rethax had ever encountered. They were enormous, impossibly enormous, dwarfing even the largest vessels in the Volanthi fleet. "How many?" he whispered. 100 and counting, sir." 200. The numbers keep climbing. Rethax watched the display in disbelief as more and more signatures appeared. 50 ships became 100. 100 became 200. By the time the portals closed, over 200 warships had arrived in the system. The largest vessel was over 9 kilometers long, a mountain of metal and weapons that made his flagship look like a toy. Its hull was covered in strange symbols, and its engines burned with energy readings that should have been impossible. "This cannot be right," his weapons officer stammered. "Human ships are small. Human technology is primitive. Our intelligence reports clearly stated that they pose no military threat." "Then explain what I am looking at," Rethax roared. Nobody could. A transmission cut through all frequencies, overriding every communication system in the fleet. The main display switched automatically to show a human male seated in a command chair. He was older, perhaps 60 years by human standards, with gray hair and sharp blue eyes. He wore a black uniform covered in medals and symbols of rank. Behind him, Rethax could see a bridge crew working with calm efficiency. Their equipment was sleek and advanced, nothing like the primitive technology human ships were supposed to have. "I am Admiral Marcus Cole of the United Earth Coalition Strategic Reserve," the human said in a voice that carried absolute authority. "You have attacked the human colony. You have killed human civilians. You have committed an act of war against humanity." Rethax found his voice. "Admiral Cole, I am Fleet Commander Rethax of the Volanthi Dominion. I do not know where you obtained these ships, but you are making a grave mistake. The Dominion will not be intimidated by tricks and illusions. Withdraw now or face total destruction." Admiral Cole did not react to the threat. He simply stared at Rethax with those cold blue eyes. "Your government was warned 6 months ago," the Admiral continued. "Ambassador Kethril told your High Sovereign exactly what would happen if you attacked us. Your fleet was warned by Governor Chun 18 hours ago. She gave you every chance to leave peacefully." He leaned forward slightly. "You did not listen." Rethax slammed his claw against his chair. "Enough of this. You cannot expect me to believe that humans built a fleet like this. Your species discovered faster than light travel only 60 years ago. You have no industrial capacity for vessels this size. Our intelligence would have detected construction efforts on this scale." For the first time, Admiral Cole smiled. It was not a friendly expression. "Your intelligence," he said slowly, "saw exactly what we wanted them to see. 60 years of FTL travel, Commander. 60 years you thought we spent fumbling in the dark like children. 60 years your spies watched us build pathetic little frigates and outdated defense platforms." He stood from his chair and walked closer to the camera. "Did it never occur to you to wonder why? Did none of your analysts ask themselves why a species as creative as humanity would settle for such primitive technology? Did no one in your dominion stop to think that perhaps we were hiding something?" Rethax felt a chill run through his body. "Humanity learned long ago that the galaxy is full of predators," Admiral Cole continued. "Species like yours, who see kindness as weakness and peace as submission. So we built 2 fleets. One for the galaxy to see, small and harmless and easy to dismiss. And one for moments like this." He gestured at the ships visible through the bridge windows behind him. "Welcome to the Strategic Reserve, Commander. 247 warships, each one built with technology your species cannot even imagine. We've been preparing for this day since before we made first contact. We have been waiting for a predator stupid enough to attack us." Admiral Cole sat back down in his chair. "Congratulations! You won the lottery!" Rethax looked at his tactical display. The human fleet was spreading out, surrounding his 40 ships like a net closing around trapped fish. His weapons officer was running calculations, trying to find some way to fight back. "Commander," the officer reported with a trembling voice, "their shields are generating power levels we cannot penetrate. Their weapon systems are charging, and I cannot identify the technology. We are completely outmatched." Rethax made a decision. "All ships, attack formation. Target the largest vessel. If we can destroy their flagship, the rest may retreat." Admiral Cole seemed to hear the order because his smile grew wider. "Commander Rethax, I will give you the same chance we gave your government and your colony. Surrender now, and your crews will be treated as prisoners of war. Continue this foolishness, and none of you will survive." Rethax responded by ordering his fleet to open fire. Every Volanthi weapon blazed to life. Plasma lances and missiles and energy beams streaked toward the human flagship. Admiral Cole did not even flinch. The weapons struck the human shields and vanished. They did not splash harmlessly against the barriers like normal attacks. They simply ceased to exist, absorbed by technology so advanced it seemed like magic. "Very well," Admiral Cole said, was something that sounded almost like disappointment. Let the record show that the Volanthi chose this fate for themselves. He turned to his crew. All ships weapons free. The human fleet began to fire. And Fleet Commander Rethax finally understood the terrible truth. Humanity had never been prey. They had been the hunters all along. The battle lasted exactly 11 minutes. Fleet Commander Rethax watched in horror as his fleet was torn apart by weapons he could not understand. The first ship to die was the Dominion's Wrath, his flagship's sister vessel. One moment it was there, firing everything it had at the human lines. The next moment it simply stopped existing. There was no explosion. There was no debris field. The ship did not break apart or burn or drift powerless through space. It was there, and then it was not, erased from reality by a beam of white light that left afterimages burned into every sensor system in the fleet. What was that? His weapons officer screamed. What kind of weapon does that? Nobody could answer him. The second ship to die was the Volanthi Pride, destroyed by a missile that punched through its shields like they were made of paper. The third was the Conqueror's Glory, cut in half by some kind of directed energy weapon that sliced through its hull as easily as a claw through soft flesh. Rethax shouted orders, but his commands made no difference. His ships fired their weapons constantly, plasma lances blazing across the void, missiles streaking toward their targets. Nothing worked. Human shields absorbed everything the Volanthi threw at them without showing any signs of strain. Meanwhile, human weapons hit with devastating precision. Their targeting systems tracked multiple targets simultaneously, their point defense networks shooting down incoming attacks faster than Volanthi sensors could follow. Every shot they fired found its mark. All ships retreat, Rethax finally ordered. Maximum speed. Get us out of here. 3 cruisers tried to run. They turned away from the battle and pushed their engines to full power, desperate to escape the killing field. Human vessels moved to intercept them with acceleration that should have crushed their crews into pulp. They caught the fleeing ships within minutes and destroyed them without mercy. 5 frigates attempted to surrender. They cut their engines and broadcast pleas for mercy on all channels. The humans accepted their surrender, moving in to disable their weapons and take their crews prisoner. Rethax felt a small moment of hope. Perhaps the humans would show mercy if he surrendered as well. But then he remembered the 1,200 civilians his fleet had killed when they destroyed the orbital platforms. He remembered the arrogant words he had spoken to Governor Chun. He remembered how he had laughed at her warnings. He knew there would be no mercy for him. The battle raged on around his flagship. Ship after ship vanished from his tactical display, each loss representing thousands of Volanthi soldiers dying in the cold darkness of space. Some fought to the end, firing uselessly until human weapons silenced them forever. Others tried to flee and were run down. A few managed to surrender before being destroyed. Rethax watched it all with growing despair. In his entire career, he had never lost a battle. He had commanded fleets against rebellious subjects and primitive species, and even against rival Volanthi factions. He had always won because the Dominion had always been stronger. This was supposed to be the natural order of things. But the humans had changed the rules. Commander, his sensor officer reported with a voice that had gone flat with shock. We have lost 32 ships. Only 8 remain, including this vessel. The humans have taken no casualties. No casualties. 247 human ships against 40 Volanthi warships, and not a single human loss. It was not a battle, it was an execution. A breach alarm screamed through the bridge. Rethax spun around to see sparks flying from the main entrance. Something was cutting through the reinforced metal doors. Something that glowed white-hot. Security teams to the bridge, he ordered. But he knew it was useless. His security teams were probably already dead or fighting their own losing battles elsewhere on the ship. The doors fell inward with a thunderous crash. Through the smoking entrance stepped figures in armor unlike anything Rethax had ever seen. They were human-shaped, but they moved with impossible speed and strength. Their suits were covered in weapons and sensors, turning each soldier into a walking war machine. They carried rifles that hummed with contained energy. Rethax's bridge guards opened fire. Their plasma pistols hit the armored figures directly, scoring blackened marks on the alien metal, but the humans did not even slow down. They returned fire with precise bursts, and the guards fell one by one. In seconds, it was over. The entire bridge crew was either dead or cowering on the floor with their claws raised in surrender. One of the armored figures walked toward Rethax. The human reached up and removed their helmet, revealing the face of a young woman with short black hair and hard brown eyes. She could not have been more than 25 years old by human standards, barely an adult. "Fleet Commander Rethax," she said. "By order of Admiral Cole, you are under arrest for war crimes against the civilian population of New Providence." Rethax stared at her in disbelief. This child, this tiny soft creature, had just walked through his elite guards like they were nothing. "How?" he whispered. "How is this possible? Your species is weak. You have no claws, no armor, no natural weapons. How can you do this?" The young Marine tilted her head slightly. "You know, your High Sovereign asked our ambassador the same question 6 months ago. He listed all the things humans do not have. No natural armor, no venom, no psionics." She stepped closer until her face was just centimeters from his. "He forgot to ask what we do have. We have creativity, and we have patience, and we have a very, very long memory. Your empire has bullied and killed and conquered for 12,000 years. You thought no one would ever be strong enough to stop you." She smiled, and it was not a kind expression. "Surprise!" Rethax was dragged from his bridge and placed in a holding cell. Through the small window of his cell, he could see the remains of his fleet, broken ships and scattered debris in the fading glow of reactor fires. 40 warships reduced to nothing in 11 minutes. And the humans had not lost a single vessel. As he sat alone in the darkness, Rethax finally understood the full weight of what had happened. This was not just a military defeat. It was the beginning of the end for the Volanti Dominion. The humans had revealed their true strength, and now the entire galaxy would know. The predators had become the prey, and there was nothing anyone could do to change it. 3 weeks had passed since the Battle of Kepler 442, and High Sovereign Maldois had not slept in days. He stood before the great windows of the Crystal Spire, looking out at the sky above Vellum Prime. For 12,000 years, that sky had been a symbol of Volanti power. Their fleets had ruled those stars without challenge. Their empire had stretched across 800 systems, wealthy beyond measure and feared by all. Now a human dreadnought hung in low orbit, its dark hull visible even from the surface. It had arrived 3 days ago, appearing without warning in the heart of Volanti territory. No alarm had been raised. No defense fleet had moved to intercept it. By the time anyone realized what was happening, the massive vessel was already in position above the capital. A reminder, the humans had called it. Maldois had watched the reports come in over the past 3 weeks, each one worse than the last. The human fleet had not stopped after destroying the third fleet at Kepler 442. They had swept through Volanti space like a storm, attacking every military installation within 50 light years of human territory. The fortress at Kethron had fallen in 6 hours. The shipyards above Maltax had been reduced to scrap metal in less than a day. The training facilities on Vorn had surrendered without firing a single shot. Base after base, station after station, fleet after fleet, all of them destroyed or captured or scattered. And still the humans had not lost a single ship. Malloys had contacted the other great powers of the galaxy, hoping to form an alliance against this sudden threat. The Khazari Collective had refused to get involved. The Thrall Concordat had laughed at him. The ancient machines had simply ignored his messages. None of them wanted to stand against humanity. A door opened behind him, and his advisor entered with news. "High Sovereign, the human ambassador has arrived. She is waiting in the throne room." Malloys closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He knew this moment was coming. The humans had made it clear that they wanted to negotiate, but negotiations implied that both sides had something to offer. What did the Volante Dominion have left to bargain with? He walked slowly to the throne room, flanked by his personal guards. The same crystal walls glowed around him. The same holographic displays floated in the air, but everything felt different now. The power and glory of the Dominion had been exposed as an illusion. Ambassador Sarah Kethril stood in the center of the room, exactly where she had stood 6 months ago. She wore the same simple blue uniform. She carried the same calm expression. Nothing about her had changed. But everything about how Malloy saw her had changed completely. He remembered laughing at this woman. He remembered calling her species weak and insignificant. He remembered dismissing her with contempt and telling her to return to her mud world. How arrogant he had been. How blind. The nobles and generals who had laughed with him 6 months ago were notably absent today. Many of them had fled to distant colonies. Others were hiding in their estates, hoping the humans would forget about them. A few had taken their own lives rather than face what was coming. Malloy sat on his throne and forced himself to meet the ambassador's eyes. "You have returned," he said, his voice hollow. "I told you I would," Ambassador Kethril replied. "I told you that you would regret your decision. Did you think I was making an empty threat?" Malloys had no answer. "Your empire has murdered 17 species over the past 12,000 years," the ambassador continued. "You have enslaved countless millions. You have burned worlds and shattered civilizations and called it the natural order of things." She took a step forward. "That ends today." She placed a datapad on the floor before his throne, the same gesture she had made during her first visit. "These are our terms. You will withdraw all military forces from systems within 200 light-years of human space. You will pay full reparations to the families of those killed at New Providence. You will release every slave species currently under Volante control." Malloys looked at the datapad like it was a venomous creature. "And if we refuse?" Ambassador Kethril tilted her head slightly. "High Sovereign, your species has ruled through fear for 12,000 years. You conquered because others were too weak to resist. You killed because no one could stop you. You forgot what it feels like to be the smaller creature facing the larger predator." She smiled that same quiet smile she had worn when she left this room 6 months ago. "We are here to remind you." Malloys looked up at her, this small, soft creature who had brought his empire to its knees. "How did you do it?" he asked quietly. "How did you hide so much power for so long? Our spies watched your colonies. Our analysts studied your technology. We were certain that humanity was weak. You saw what we wanted you to see," the ambassador replied. 60 years ago, when we first ventured into the galaxy, we discovered very quickly that space was filled with predators. Species like yours, who measured others by their claws and their fangs. She clasped her hands behind her back. "So we decided to appear weak. We built small ships and primitive weapons and let everyone believe we were insignificant. Meanwhile, in secret, we built the real fleet. We developed technologies that would make us strong. We prepared for the day when some predator would try to devour us." "But why?" Malloys demanded. Why not simply reveal your power and demand respect? Because that is how predators think, Ambassador Kethril said. Humans are not predators, High Sovereign. We are survivors. We endured ice ages and plagues and famines and wars that nearly destroyed us. We clawed our way out of the mud on a world that tried to kill us every day. Her eyes grew hard. We learned patience. We learned to plan for the long future. And we learned that true strength is not measured by how loudly you roar, but by what you can do when the moment demands it. Maldoy slumped in his throne, suddenly feeling very old. What happens now? He asked. Now you have a choice, the ambassador replied. Accept our terms and survive. The Volanthi Dominion will be diminished, but it will continue to exist. Your people will learn to live as equals with other species instead of their masters. In time, perhaps we can even become allies. She paused. Or refuse and watch everything you have built crumble to dust. The choice is yours. Maldois looked at the dreadnought visible through the window. He thought of his shattered fleets and his burning stations. He thought of the reports filled with words like impossible and unknown technology. He thought of how easily he had dismissed the small creature standing before him. Very well, he whispered. We accept your terms. Ambassador Kethril nodded. A wise decision, High Sovereign. Perhaps there is hope for your species after all. She turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. One more thing. Remember this day. Remember what happens when you underestimate humanity. Because we will not give you a second lesson. She walked out without looking back. High Sovereign Maldois, ruler of what remained of the Volanthi Dominion, sat alone in his throne room and faced a truth he had never imagined. The galaxy had a new order now, and humanity had written it